So it seemed really, I was like, oh, this is really pertinent. And which is why I'm here. Of course, we've worked together. She's a legendary figure in the cultural scene of Pakistan. Fifi also, who I adore, as all of you know.
That's my claim to fame, that Adnan Malik adores.
She's a journalist, she's a critical thinker. She used to run this amazing magazine called Extra back in the day, which I used to love.
I work for the BBC, and I do a lot of work on Pakistani film and on television. So that is and it's a huge honor for me to be on the same stage as Navid Shahzad, who I grew up watching her amazing Tal Batol and in the old days, and that was my introduction to her, and interviewed her a long time ago when I was a novice as a journalist, and went to her office and sat there and just imbibed all the stuff that I could. And I've just been reading her book on Turkish drama as well. How many of you here watch Turkish drama? Yes, everybody, yes. And I can't pronounce all the names, but Navid Shahzad is going to help me with that. I think, should we start off a little bit while we're waiting for Khaled? Maybe, Navid, you could do an introduction to your book.
Yes, certainly. Well, my book is called Aslan's Roar. In Turkish, Aslan means lion. And this is a symbol that comes repetitively throughout all the drama that you see. Any young man who's really promising, or any young man who has courage and principles and so on, is immediately referred to as Aslan. However, before we go into my book, I'd like to introduce the whole concept of what is known as the Turkish dizi. These are not called drama series. These are not telenovelas. These are not masalsals, as they are called in Egypt and the Middle East. They have created a distinct genre of their own. And this is what intrigued me. Not only the fact that there is still room to create yet another genre within the visual arts, and also the fact that it's a Muslim country that's producing it, and within the short span of 15 years has become the second largest exporter of television drama, and they're only second to the US.
And apparently it's an industry of 300 million or so.
Well, it's a huge industry, and I think the young women here will be delighted to hear that there are a huge number of women working in it. Not only as executive administrators or producers or on the business side of it, but they're actually working creatively as directors. And the ones who are working as directors and writers are now award-winning and recognized all over the world. So if there's one career that's really booming as far as women are concerned, it's Turkish television. Having said that, I have to warn you, it's a very, very competitive and very stiff, it's a cutthroat world, because they work 18 hours a day. They do one episode which ranges from 120 to 150 minutes each every week. Now, for anybody who's familiar with television work, this is an enormous amount of work. And they've had numerous strikes and so on, because it was actually gauged that the television sets were not safe places to work at. So the unions went on strike. But coming back to the idea of the dizi, they're actually called dizileries. And the new genre that they introduced is not only the fact that these are much, much longer than episodes that you watch on television coming to you from the West, or from Pakistan, or from India, or any other part of the world, but also the fact that they have set standards which are unique to them. The first and foremost of these, I would say, is the kind of change that they have brought about in the way they narrate a story. Because look, film, video, particularly when you're doing a drama series or even a documentary, you're telling a story. And the way they tell a story is unique, not only to the Turkish cultural environment, to its sociology, to its history, but they take these very specific, country-specific things, and they universalize them. Because the focus always, in any kind of program that you see, number one is the family. That can range from a patriarchal structure to a matriarchal structure. Both are eminent, they are very often used, but what really intrigued me and why I wanted to write this book was the fact that as a Muslim woman, and I'm sure some of you have this issue, whatever your religious inclinations are, there's a tug of war between religion and modernity all the time. I have felt it, young people that I teach at university and at schools, etc., they have felt the tension. The Middle East is rife with this tension. So I thought about what they were presenting and what they were talking about. Being a Muslim country, showing characters who say their namaz 5 times a day. The Maulvi is very much respected. The teacher is very much respected, but at the same time, the younger generation can have a relationship, which is an extramarital relationship. There can be illegitimate children. The way they dress, they can have liquor, they can, all the kind of things that you associate with the Western culture. Now, Turkey is unique because it's the only country in the world that is on 2 continents. I accept that the European part of it is just a footprint. But the fact remains that the cultural impact of the West is always there. So, modernity versus tradition. This was the basic reason why I started studying Turkish television. All my friends used to tell me, "Tumne mera sultan nahi dekha, tum kis kisam ki aurat ho?" I'm not interested. And really, 2 years ago, I just was not interested. You know, the whole ethos of the harem and so on and so forth. I said, Hollywood has been there, done that. They may have done it badly or incorrectly, but who wants to go through all that again? And then, Fifi, if I'm rambling on, I have to share this, why the book began. I'm not a superstitious person. I'm not a particularly religious one either. I have great faith. That's a separate issue. But I do believe in extrasensory perception, and I do believe in epiphanies, and I had one. This is the year 2017. I was in Karachi. I was dubbing for Punjab Nahi Jaungi, and I just couldn't get the right pitch for my character. And given my years of experience, I was really annoyed with myself. What should have taken me at best 3 to 4 hours actually took half a day. I was very upset. I came back to Lahore and I felt sick. I was diagnosed with bacterial pneumonia and had to be hospitalized immediately and so on. And one of the nights, with a raging fever and very, very sick, I had a dream. Now, some of you can say, well, this is an older lady with a crush on somebody. I don't mind if you say that. Well, there's no age limit to having a crush on somebody.
I dream about Kivank, what's his name?
Oh, Kivan Tatulu.
Yes, I dream about him too.
Yes. I'm not interested in the Brad Pitt of the Middle East. There's another actor, the one that I'm going to talk about. I dreamt that I was in a pit and that I was trying to clamber out and I couldn't. Now, those of us who can psychoanalyze dreams know what that means when I was so ill. But what happened next was I heard a lot of voices up there, and then one voice asked me, and this is a phrase that remained with me, and then I checked up later and I understood what it meant, because at that point in my dream, I didn't understand. Nishivan Burda, what are you doing here? And I later learned that it was a Turkish phrase. a hand in a black sleeve came down, pulled at my hand and pulled me out of the pit. Okay, fine. But there was something very unusual about the hand. The three fingers, foremost fingers, were almost equal. And the little finger, sort of, a lot of people have these very flexible joints. It sort of went up like that. Now that's a very unusual hand, but it was a male hand. As I told you earlier, I had not seen any Turkish drama. I didn't know any Turkish actor. And one day, just surfing, I see the same hand. And then I put the hand to the face, and then I discover it's a young Turkish actor called Engin Akurek. And then I was a little taken aback, because where did this come from? Anyway, to cut a very, very long and very interesting story short, I started to look at television drama. And what I saw there absolutely blew me away. And I thought, this is a Muslim country with a history very much like ours. It's as young as we are as a republic. They have the same issues that we do. Look at what they've done and look at what we've done. Now, I'm in a position of strength when I say that because I'm one of the pioneers of Pakistan television. TRT, which is the exact parallel of PTV in Turkey, started in 1960 or so. And for the next 20 years, they had a monopoly. There was no other broadcasting channel like PTV. They broadcast only thrice a week, and it was black and white. And then suddenly, like in Pakistan, when Musharraf, I think it's the only good thing he did, was when he opened up the media and he allowed private channels to start broadcasting. That's exactly what happened in Turkey. And then it was like, boom. Within 15 years, there they were, right up there. They'd blown the Brazilian telenovelas out of the water. They had absolutely destroyed the Egyptian masalsal. Latin America was crazy about them. We have great actors. We have very good directors. We have no woman director. Now that's something to think about. Because Fatma Gul Suchune, one of the finest and one of the most popular Turkish series ever, is now being shown in a clinic in California to help rape victims. That's the kind of impact that Turkish television has. And it was directed by Hilal Seral, who is one of the foremost directors in Turkey and perhaps in the world. She's so good.
I'm going to move there.
Okay. So
is
I
Khaled
have
here?
a lot to learn. Yeah.
Oh.
Is he here? Okay, so Navid, one of the things that I wanted to sort of ask you is that do you think the global emphasis is shifting in terms of culture or broadcast, etc.? So for example, you have Korean pop going on, you have Turkish dramas happening. So the whole center of, Hollywood is sort of
Oh, it shifted a long time ago.
Yeah.
Yes, Fifi, I think that's a very good question.
Yeah.
And it also gives you an idea of how quickly and how multifariously the digital world is now invading us, wherever we may be. Even Turkish television has felt the impact of digital platforms, because with the present government having clamped down very heavily on censor codes and so on, they have very restrictive rules for how much material can be shown. So every 20 minutes, they have to show X number of advertisements. Now, the way it works in Turkey is all the cost is recovered from advertising. Turkey is relatively cheap as far as advertising is concerned. And they have a cutthroat system. They float something like 60 serials per year. There are about 12 major producers, and between them, it's about an average of 5 each. 50% of them are pulled before the 6th episode. How does that work? Unlike us and unlike other places, the entire series is not written beforehand. They have a certain number of episodes which they've written, they've kept them in hand, and a certain number of episodes that they have actually directed and produced, and they're ready to be broadcast. And they watch, they monitor all the time. The first measure is the 3rd episode, how much revenue is coming in. The second is 6, and the third is 13. And if you don't make the kind of numbers that they're looking at, they will pull it anytime. After the 3rd, 4th, it doesn't matter who's in it. Maybe the biggest star in Turkey, they are ruthless about it because that's the way they make money. The government has been greatly helpful because they have given them incentives like tax rebates and also in selling Turkish television abroad. There are certain fairs where, and they shift from major cities to cities. It's called the Discom. And Turkey has had the honor of being the country of the year in 2015. And that's where everybody takes their product and they display it and they share it. And then that's where all the bidding and the buying takes place. So it's really like an auction. I never heard of any of Pakistan Television's private or public sector series going there and competing. Our government has never been represented there. So what are we talking about? As far as digital economy is concerned, because of this censorship clampdown, a lot of people are now shifting to direct streaming. And there's Poo TV and there's Blue TV. These are direct streaming. So they don't have to answer to RTUK, which is the watchdog, the public sector watchdog for how many kisses there are in one scene or in one series and so on, and how much nudity there is. And of course, if you were watching Turkish television even now, you will see that the bottle of raki is sort of fuzzed over and so on and so forth. You'd be surprised to know that the present President, Erdogan, pulled Muhteşem Yüzyıl, which is Mera Sultan, from being shown on Turkish Airlines, because he said it misrepresented our history. Actually, it does, because Suleiman spent most of his life in the saddle and waging war rather than making jewelry and satisfying the women of his harem. It was part of his life, but of course it wasn't the major focus. But this is poetic license, and it's working, and it's bringing in the revenue, and everybody is happy about it. Netflix is now buying so much Turkish material, and actually they've now done 2 original Netflix series which are Turkish. The Protector and Atiye, which has just gone on with Beren Saat. So,
Navid, why do you think that Turkish dizis are not lost in translation? Why do you think that they are accepted and watched in so many different cultures, whether it's Russia, whether it's, you know, even in South America, in Pakistan? Why do they transition so well?
Well, one of the main reasons, now there are 2 things that you've touched upon. You've talked about translation. You've also talked about the reception of the material.
Yes.
They're 2 totally different things.
Yeah.
there's a great deal that is lost in translation, a great deal. Because, not that I know Turkish, but I have taught myself Turkish. And what I do is I watch the subtitled version of each episode from various channels. So you get different translations from each one. And it's quite amazing what a difference it makes. If one character is being translated as saying, "My head is porridge," the other one is saying, "I'm all confused." So actually it's that variation in linguistics that is of great interest to me as a literature person. As far as lending themselves well to cultures that are dissimilar, I just started out and then I sort of got sidetracked. Number one, family. Number two, love of children. Number three, sacrifice. Number four, martyrdom. For the sake of the country, you lay down your life. Number five, very, very cleverly built into it, is all the nostalgia that comes from the Ottoman Empire having been such an extensive empire, and the memory of all that coming back to, say, the Balkan countries and so on, a time when the father was head of the family, a time when there was a joint family system. So it's really built on a kind of historical nostalgia, which is very cleverly wrapped in Turkish literature, in Turkish music. The whole concept of the family eating together. There's a whole chapter in my book about the sufra, or the dining table, or how we eat. I mean, it's really quite beautifully done. They have this low table around which everybody sits. Now, I have a Kashmiri background, so I remember all that. And they lay a cloth beneath it, which is called the sufra. Everybody sits with their legs folded, and they put that cloth over their knees. It's like a large napkin that everybody uses. And then everybody digs in. All the dishes are there. It's like your vazwan and everything. Your rice is there, and everybody digs into it. This whole culture of family, of celebration. For example, in Pakistani television series, I have never seen anyone celebrating circumcision. It's such a part of our culture. It's such a part of our religion. And in blockbuster series like Karapara Ashk, you have a whole episode which is dedicated to celebrating circumcision. And the kirwa, the man who helps with the circumcision, is usually a Christian neighbor. He is not Muslim. I mean, the kind of things that you discover, because they're unapologetic about it. They're talking about it all the time. The whole muhalla culture, which I remember as a child. अब तो पता ही नहीं होता कि आपके साथ कौन आके रह रहा है और कोई फौतीदगी हो गई है या कुछ or whatever. Nobody cares. I live in an apartment building and nobody knows anybody. It's such a pity. And I remember a time when the neighborhood used to share food. अच्छा सरसों का साग पकाया, थोड़ा सा इधर ज़रूर भेजना, या हाय मैंने हलीम बनाई है, या कीमे वाले नान बने हैं, थोड़े से इधर भेज दो, थोड़े से उधर भेज दो. I mean, it was communal. These are the things that people miss. And this is what Turkish television...
And this is quite universal in a way.
You know, eating together, the birth of a child, a marriage, the coming of age for a young man. I mean, these are all celebrations. And this is what they have capitalized on. And that's why they're also the fact that their actors are hugely handsome and the women are beautiful. I've never seen such a range of color of eyes as I do on Turkish television. It makes a lot of difference if you got great. Plus, they all know how to act. Ji, certainly. Absolutely. देखिए, you're absolutely right, and I'll tell you that in Istanbul itself, there's a whole bazaar where they just sell clothes for circumcision. There are crowns, and there are wands, and there are robes, and there are beautiful things, and it's really a joy to go through it. There's a wonderful little piece in my book about what is it that makes a man. So I did a survey of this. I looked at Western novels, and I looked at Pakistani Urdu novels, and I looked at Turkish, of course, in translation. And the best definition of what is a man came from a young man who said, a man is someone who is a Sunni, because you know Turkey is all Sunni. He has to be circumcised, and he has to be a Turk. So no other kind of masculinity is acceptable. And yet I discover, much to my pleasant surprise, that men actually apply mehndi. Now this is something that is unique to Turkish culture. There is a wonderful little piece that I found in the New York Times from a 1936 edition. Don't ask me how I got it, but I got it. And in it, they quote a village headman, jo village mukhtar hua karta. They're interviewing him, and they ask him about henna. And he says, yes, of course, we use henna. We use it 3 times in our lives. Number 1, the bride-to-be uses it on her hand the day before she gets married. It's a sign of joy and celebration and a kind of promise of hope and children and so on. So it's like looking towards the future. The second time we apply henna is to the young man who is going off to join the military. And the henna may be applied either by the father or the mother or even the beloved. So there's no gender bias as far as that is concerned. Why? Because he has promised to lay down his life for his country. So he is anointed with the green paste that leaves that lovely orange color. And the third time, this is something that we are familiar with, they anoint the sacrificial animal. But these 3 things are unique to Turkey only. No other country does that.
Navid, to bring it back to Pakistani drama as well, which I think is a concern for all of us, because Pakistani drama has taken a certain turn in the last 5 to 10 years, which is a long way from what it used to be. A long way from Khuda Ki Basti, a long way from even the Hasina Moin serials.
Gurbatein aur Fasle.
Gurbatein aur Fasle, and all of those dramas, the Saira Kazmi dramas and so on. In which I think that our dramas have become prescriptive in a way. They tell us what being a good woman is. And being a good woman now, nearly 90% of dramas, serials are shot in the home. And half the time the women are in the kitchen. Being a woman who works is frowned upon. Women who work are shown as seductresses. And yet in Turkish drama, when we're talking about masculinity, we're talking about femininity, we have very strong roles for women. even in, like the Hurram Sultan and, the Kusum Sultan, all of these women in the courts as well. But even in the modern dramas, serials, Fatma Gul, for instance, is a revolutionary drama in that sense. And in Pakistan, they will say that, oh, these kind of dramas, हमारे लोग accept नहीं करते कि हम इस किस्म की चीज़ दिखाएं. They would not have made a serial on that, saying that women cannot be projected in that manner, or it's too controversial, or it's too whatever. And yet, the same Pakistani audience watched Fatma Gul, and the ratings were sky high. Yes. They were getting better ratings than any other Pakistani drama as well. So why is it that they are able to do this and give these positive role models for women alongside positive roles for men as well? Because in our dramas, even men are either starkly evil, or they're getting married 3 times, or they, all of these kind of things. Can you perhaps just talk about why are they able to do this and why are we not able to do this?
Well, they're not able to do it without problems. Yeah. I'll tell you that. I talked about censorship earlier, and there have been occasions where if there was news about an intimate scene being shot for a film, that representatives of RT UK would sit through the shooting to make sure that it really wasn't a risque scene as such. There is a series called Behzad Che. Now, C with a cedilla in Turkish is pronounced Che, just like Che Guevara, and he's a rogue of a man. And so that program has been fined by RT UK to the tune of $150,000 for a certain episode, and so on. But they have persisted. Now you see, they have the same issues that we do. A cosmopolitan urban population, but 70% a rural population, where the reach is only by state media. There used to be a time when radio was very, very active, but it no longer is, unfortunately. Actually, all soaps, all serial dramas started with drama, with radio. There is on record a BBC series that ran in Afghanistan long before that poor country was ravaged by war for something like 10 years. And it was a dynastic drama series, and the main focus was population control. So this is how they built it. It's not that other countries have not been able to do it. It's just that Pakistan is an ostrich. We just bury our head in the sand. We don't want to take any risks. I'll tell you from my own example. Shoaib Saab, who is my guru, Shoaib Hashmi, translated Anui's Antigone into Urdu. And we performed it for PTV. I played Antigone, he played Creon, Marhoom Abid Ali. It was his first play. It was never aired because late Bhutto Saab called it in because he was intrigued. Acha, Antigone kar rahe hain. He saw it and he said, no, can't run. It's too much like me. So, you see, but nobody was willing to take the risk. The number of times that I have been banned from Pakistan television is unbelievable. I never talk about it because I'm not a controversial person, but I have persisted. I have continued to work. So one of the main reasons is this. Secondly, Fifi, it may sound very superficial, but you know, when you look at a young girl in a dress, and you look at a young man who doesn't look like your young men, he looks rather Mediterranean and so on, and they speak a different language, even if you've got subtitling or dubbing, people tend to think, acha, ye unki kahani hai, ye hamari kahani nahi hai. We've had myriads of stories here which the press has talked about, buried under the sand and so on. For example, missing persons in Balochistan. I mean, this is one of the most tragic things that's happening in the country. Who has ever made a series in which someone's child disappears? Who has made a series in which the hero actually works? Computer लेके जाता है, टेबल पे, यूं खोलता है, ऐनक पहनता है, उतारता है, ऐनक पहनता है, उतारता है. That's work. Fatma Gul, the main hero, is an ironmonger. He's a carpenter. Karadaya, one of the most fabulous series that I have seen. The hero is a mochi, son of a mochi.
So characters people can identify with.
Absolutely. Working class characters. Of course, वो भी है formula. गरीब लड़का, अमीर लड़की. गरीब लड़की, अमीर लड़का, वो भी हैं. All that is there. But it's set within a meaningful milieu. And that is what makes the difference. Because unless you give a narrative a heart, if it's just superficial, then it's not going to work. And the kind of plays that you talked about, जो लिखे जाते थे पुराने वक्त में, अमजद इस्लाम अमजद के ड्रामे होते हैं, अशफाक अहमद के, सफदर मीर का ड्रामा, कुर्बतें और फासले. I mean, these were based on wonderful literary pieces. Up to, look, I'm not a dinosaur that way. I welcome innovation. That's probably one of the reasons why I've survived. I welcome change, I welcome new things. Digital platforms, bring it on, because that's the way the world is going. Sometime I'll be wearing my television on my wrist. I have no problems with that. But at the same time, you have to be saying something that is rooted somewhere.
In an indigenous culture. I know we can talk about this forever because your knowledge is immense. But I think we'll just open it up to about 2-3 questions from here. Yeah.
Ahmed story, the typical narrative of Achhi Ladki. So how are you expecting the drama to present something else? I mean, no one writes Man Chalega Soda anymore. So how do you expect to see a drama like that?
My personal theory on this is that when the Indian subcontinent was partitioned, it wasn't just the land that was partitioned. Most of all, it was women who were partitioned. And that partitioning is still persisting. That was the time when film had created stereotypes of the good woman and the woman on the kotha, the Nek Parveen and the Sati Savitri, and the woman who was a kept woman. And that, unfortunately, in Muslim cultures, is something that has been very difficult to shake off. There are a lot of historical and cultural reasons for that. I mean, the whole concept of the Lucknow culture and everything. Nobody will tell you that the courtesans of Lucknow paid the highest taxes in India that anybody could know of. You never see that aspect of it, you see. So it's because 99.9% of the people who make films and create these series are men in Pakistan. It is the male gaze. He continues to partition women into the so-called good woman and the so-called vamp. That is the basic issue, which is why it's so important. And it's not all based on literature, bache. There are original screenplays being written by women as well as by men in Turkey. For example, Mera Sultan was partly written by a woman that I admire greatly. She's unfortunately not alive anymore, Miral OK. She was an activist, she was a feminist, and she was the major writer of that series. So it's how you treat your women. It's not that the Turkish women had it very easy. Not at all. They had to fight. They've had 3 major women's movements in Turkey.
Do you think, Navid, we've had to suffer greatly because we used to have those literary greats who used to write our serials? You know, you mentioned Amjad Islam, Amjad, etc., and all of that. Nurul Huda Shah, I would count in that category. And now almost all the serials are written by former digest writers. And I don't want to just deride every woman who's writing now, but sometimes what happens is that if they're not writing about women who are working, it's because they have not encountered the inside of an office, possibly.
You're absolutely right.
Priorities have changed. Producers require, drama heads require certain things. And we are unable to move away from that formula. And then when we do an Udari, we then try and replicate it again and again because it's been successful. Udari only happened because a donor gave money to make it happen.
That's right. The financing is a very, very important part.
Yeah. Adnan?
Sort of to add to that, since you've had an overview of a lot of Turkish dramas, Disease, and you've kind of
100 series.
So I'm curious about the gender roles, just to add to the conversation. Now, what have you seen? Because it is universal. I mean, everywhere from South America to mainstream America to developed and underdeveloped countries. What are the male and female archetypes? And is there a universality that connects them? Or do you see different variation in the way women are depicted and men are depicted across the board? Because, I mean, the stuff that does shine, you still see some of those existing archetypes of like Muslim narratives, which is like, the man and his different women that he's kind of interacting with in a marriage. And so that's kind of what I've seen, but I'm curious, is there more to it? And what makes it so pervasive and universally digestible?
Adnan, that's such a wonderful question. Unfortunately, we don't have time to go into it in much detail, but the fact of the matter is that they are inclusive. They will show you the young girl who comes from the gaon, very naive, doesn't know anything. That character will also be there. Then there will be a young woman who's aggressive, who's independent, who's working, jewelry designer, shoe designer, whatever. So that woman is also there. The grandmother is also there. Panch Waqt ki namazi, forgiving, loving, accepting, etc. That character is also there. Among the men, you have the macho type also, the one who throws women around and says, nahi, ye meri marzi hogi, and so on. And then you've got the modern hero, who's wonderfully, wonderfully placed to give women. Now, this is a very important factor. 90% of television is viewed by women. And it's women looking at men for a change and seeing what they have dreamt about. So it's the ideal man in that sense. He's a traditionalist when he needs to be. वो circumcision में वो बत्तियाँ भी लगाएगा, वो dance भी करेगा, वो सब कुछ करेगा. He will allow his wife or his girlfriend to work. He will be terribly jealous if there's somebody else looking at his girlfriend. He'll be very, very macho that way. He will be honest. He will be a wonderful professional. I mean, he's all kinds of men that you have dreamt about wrapped in one.
So you're saying that it doesn't seem prescriptive then, in the sense of like as the arcs play out of the disease, they're not necessarily prescriptive, they're not sort of damning the woman who's being unfaithful and glorifying the man. I'm curious how it plays out.
Again, the disease have created subgenres within themselves. There's one genre which is unique to Turkish television. Southeastern part of Turkey, they've created what is known as the tribal genre. So it's like if you were to place a story in Gujranwala of 50 years ago, that kind of thing, where the mayor was most powerful and so on, and that whole milieu is recreated. So that's a subgenre. Then they have other subgenres, very, very political drama series. I'll just tell you one example of that. Valley of the Wolves is a franchise that started in 2007. Since then, they've had spin-offs of movies and so on, and it's a franchise. And they base each series in a particular country. For example, there was Valley of the Wolves, Iraq. There was Valley of the Wolves somewhere else, and so on. And it actually created a diplomatic row between Israel and Turkey, because in one of the episodes, an Israeli undercover agent is killed by a Turkish agent, and his blood splashes on the Israeli flag. And there was this uproar between the two countries. So this is how political they are becoming, and how powerful they are actually, because MBC has taken off all Turkish television because of the conflict between Syria and Turkey, and Saudi Arabia is calling the shots. So this is how powerful media is, how powerful Turkish television is, without actually even talking about it. But the kind of influence and impact it leaves on people other than Turkish people, that's what they're afraid of.
Of that redefining the Muslim
Absolutely,
voice.
redefining the Muslim. पहले होता था एक रैम्बो आके सारा अफगानिस्तान उड़ा देता था. And it was always the white man who was the savior. It's not like that anymore. It's the Muslim Turk. And he will give you a run for your money. And he's handsome to boot.
And to the extent that our Prime Minister says we should watch Turkish drama, this is. Thank you so much. We've reached the end. I think that we all need to go and get this book right away.
It's available in the main hall.
It's available in the main hall.